You want to talk about the main event?
The last match left in Cincinnati, Jon Moxley's hometown, the AEW World Champion Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page.
And the one time that you would believe that Moxley could come in from the parking lot, because maybe he just lives down the street, he came in from the locker room area. He was already inside the building, coming down the long hallway, but he still didn't come out the entranceway. He walked into the arena. And of course, it's two baby faces fighting again for the world title in AEW, which always happens because Tony can't keep his baby face and heels straight or get heat on anybody. So, and yes, of course, it's Moxley's hometown, so they're going to boo Page because Page, actually, this is probably the best thing he's ever done as far as getting people to cheer him, because now they'll feel sorry for him, so they won't boo him as much as they would just if he was hanging around. But they seem to go full into Page is going to prove he's a man, like when he punched himself silly last week. So Page jumps the champion in the arena, even though Page is a babyface too. They can't differentiate between a guy that's going to fight a guy straight up as a man one-on-one and a guy who is just, it's all bullshit and it's all phony. I know the way they present it, but if you're a babyface, why do you want to attack the champion out on the floor and give him a suplex on the concrete floor that nobody in the arena could see because they were over in the corner? And then Page goes up to the balcony and backflips off of it onto Moxley. Why are you trying to end the guy's career in the goddamn breezeway instead of get him in the ring and beat him for the title if you're a babyface, if you're not a heinous person? They don't know how to work to where it fits the person's personality and still gets the point across. It's either all chaos or all wrestling. There's no gray area in between. So, at that point, as I mentioned to you right before we went on the air, they went to the break after the balcony backflip, and there was 20 minutes left in the show, and I said, I don't want to watch these fucking two. I'm going to go to bed, and I'll check out the rest of this match tomorrow, because already it's Moxley, they're in the crowd, backflip off the balcony, I don't want to see anymore. But then I carry some stuff up to the office, and I get on Twitter because I wanted to check and see if I should retweet anything before I went to bed. And by that point, I see that Adam Page is laying knocked out in the middle of the ring. And I was all right, so I tweeted a few things, and then I went back down to watch basically the rest of the match they had is pretty much what you would think. They came back from the break after the balcony backflip 3 minutes later, and they still weren't in the ring, but Moxley was bleeding. And at that point, it's like a parody of every Moxley match. None of it's in the ring, and he will bleed. And then, as I mentioned, Adam Page, the upright, honest, forthright cowboy from Virginia, mounts Moxley and pummels him on the steel stairs while he's bleeding profusely. And then finally they got in the ring. And they had every indie wrestling fan's dream match. They did their moves to each other back and forth, and Moxley was bleeding. And at one point, Page gave Moxley a ridiculously dangerous dead eye on the ring apron. And believe it or not, that's not what caused the injury, folks. They go to a break again. They come back. Page throws Moxley off the top rope with a sack of shit fall-away slam. Boom, that doesn't cause an injury. And then Page gives Moxley a clothesline, and Moxley, of course, takes a bump and then gets right back up and doesn't sell it. And Page runs at Moxley, and Moxley clotheslines Page. And Page goes over backwards and lands on his head and stays there. And the one thing they can be happy about was it wasn't Rick Knox, the idiot referee. It was Paul Turner. I believe Ring of Honor had those guys trained in spotting concussions and or injuries, but Paul Turner's been in the ring 20 years, and he was right there on top of it. He knew something was wrong, and he stopped it. And they brought the doctor in, Sampson, and the doctor made the official stoppage because Page ain't moving. He knocked himself out. He landed on his head. And there's 10 minutes left in the show, and the match is stopped. And then I saw on Twitter, people are trying to, well, is it Moxley's fault, or was it blah, 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 or he couldn't take this bump? Believe me, I'd love to blister one or the other of these guys with being a unprofessional dipshit, but I don't think this was anybody's fault. It was one of those things that happens. Now, having said that, a contributory factor, as you and I, Brian, were talking about earlier, is now everybody, you can't just take a clothesline. You've got to, if somebody clotheslines you, it's got to cut you a backflip. And that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to do the backflip. And instead of going all the way over on his stomach, he landed on either the side of his head or his forehead and then went down. And I mentioned to you, and we were talking about this, when 30 years ago, the first time you saw a son of a bitch take a backflip off a clothesline, you're, holy shit. Well, now there's multiple of them in every match, and they get right back up. So if there was fault to be ascribed to anybody here, it's the fault of the general wrestling population that now we got to get clothesline and take a backflip. And everybody's figured out the best method to do it. And that's what they're doing. And sooner or later, somebody was going to land on their fucking head. Guess what? Happened on live national television. But it wasn't either guy's fault except, goddamn, making shit more complicated than it needs to be. But this was not even the most dangerous thing either one of these guys did in this match. So anyway, they stopped it. And then here was the thing. There was 10 minutes left on the air, and I know they didn't expect this. But they go to the announce desk and with graphics run down the Rampage card. Somebody in the truck said, hey, Sockface, just run down the Rampage card. A guy is down being checked by the doctor. Do they do that in football? You watch football. Nobody gets hurt in baseball. It's a pussy sport. But in football,
baseball's the best sport, and people get hurt in baseball too.
Well, people can get hurt in podcasting too if you don't watch your fucking attitude, but don't make me change my tone. But if in a football game, the guy gets wiped out and he's laying there and they're putting him on a stretcher, they're checking him out, the doctors or whatever, do they just instantly say, oh, let's plug some upcoming games, or do they stay on the situation at hand?
They talk about what's happening. They can't ignore it. Obviously, there's something happening on the field with someone being taken off. They have to talk about what's happening. It just happened the other day, or a couple weeks ago in Miami, where the quarterback had another concussion on the field, and we watched everything happen on TV.
Well, they shot everything but Page, and that was the story. The player down on the field, it's a dangerous sport. We have doctors checking on him. People are concerned. No, they never shot Page again. They stayed away from it. Like it was goddamn. I know when a mark hits the ring on live TV, you try to stay away from it because that could be a legal situation. Well, who knows? Maybe this is too. They sue everybody else over there. But no, this is a players down on the field. Cover this. This makes wrestling look dangerous because it is. People were concerned about Page. They wanted to know more. But they hid Page. You never saw him again. Moxley cuts a promo. They're tight on him because he's in the ring with Page, but they won't shoot the man down. And then Moxley cuts the promo. I mean, Jade had got chicken shit in earlier without getting bleeped, but there had been and MJF said, goddamn, but there was other bleepings on this program. Then Moxley got bleeped with whatever he said, then said shit twice. And then called MJF out. And MJF came out, milked the cash in of the chip, but then made the challenge for Full Gear and said, for the first time in my life, I'm going to earn it. That made my butthole quiver a little bit. Moxley gets bleeped again for saying something and again for saying something. He's a menace to live television. And they went off the air. But, I mean, you could, I'm not criticizing the way they handled this. They stopped it quickly. The doctor was in there. The thing I'm criticizing is then they just completely ignored the only story going on, that Paige was down and hurt and being checked by the doctor. That was not the point to run through the matches on a show that nobody's going to watch anyway.
Your opinion doesn't change about that if the thought at the time wasn't, oh, it's a concussion. If the thought was maybe he potentially had some sort of spinal damage or some kind of neck issue, and that would prevent him from maybe, again, Moxley in the ring said, I hope he can walk again. That's where a lot of people's minds went.
Well, yeah, and then Moxley, maybe Moxley was trying to make it more dangerous than it actually was because he wanted to make it a big deal. I don't know, but the point is that it's the same thing. Moxley's not a spinal surgeon, and I don't think Doc Sampson is Dr. Jim Andrews in Birmingham, the orthopedic guru. They knew he'd got knocked out. You're not going to diagnose a spinal injury if he's communicating and he was moving his arm, which we saw that. Then there's no reason that you couldn't have a long shot of the ring. I'm not talking about put the camera up his fucking nose and intrude on the conversation he's having with the doctor, but you could report on what's going on.
Should it be covered? Should it be covered like something that's actually happening by those commentators? Taz was the only one. Yes,
because it was actually happening.
Because Taz was the only one who showed any sort of emotion really at all to what was happening.
Well, because he's been hurt before and he knows how it feels and he knows what's going on. But yes, that was the story. Not give us the full diagnosis, but they took the bottom rope off. They put him on a stretcher. They carried him out. That would be seen in football. How many years ago was it that one of the University of Louisville basketball players broke his leg in a game, and it was so gruesome that when his own teammates and actually the opposing team on the sidelines saw it, you didn't see it on camera. You saw the teammates react to it. Half of the college basketball players jumped up to their feet and jumped backwards over their bench. It was so gruesome. The lower bone snapped, came out through the skin, everything. You never saw that detail on television. You saw the guy go down, and then they shot the court long ways, and they replayed the reaction shots. Once the viewers saw how the ball players viewed the incident, they didn't want to see it. But they were reporting on the guy. We've got the EMTs there. They've called the ambulance. They're not up on the goddamn compound fracture, but people know what's going on because that was the story. It's a live sporting event. These things happen that should have been covered. But all of these people are in show business. They're not in sports. They don't know what would actually happen. They think they're all actors and entertainers.
You know, when a player gets hurt, because it happens in baseball too, Jim. You know, if a player crashes into a wall, a lot of times players crash into each other. Someone doesn't yell, I got it, or someone doesn't hear the other person yell, I got it. Swami heard it because he's barking up a storm out there. But usually what happens is you see the injury. Unless it's something really severe, you'll see a few replays of it to try to figure out what's happening. Because the commentators are trying to figure out what's happening just like you are at home.
Yeah.
Then maybe you'll see some shots of some fans watching. Maybe some people in the dugout watching. If it's bad, they're not going to do close-ups of the player. If he's moving around, you may see him put his hand to his head. And then usually they put him on a cart, take him off the field. You see that, and you get a big ovation from the fans. They address it. They don't just have someone disappear in the middle of the game, and you just have to hope that someone else mentions it ever again.
And I'll say this. I thought of this, and then we'll close up. I've got places to go, people to see, and things to do. But I was trying to remember in my time as a photographer and then as a performer, a photographer in the 70s, performer in the 80s, booker and performer in the 90s, I'm trying to remember the first time that I was either saw or was present when somebody got knocked out and couldn't finish a match. And I can't remember it. I saw a guy in the Gardens get his leg broken one night, and Obviously, he couldn't get up and finish that match, but it was a tag team match, so the partner just it was Luke Graham, and the guy that got his leg broke was John Rogers. Crazy Luke Graham gives the fucking thumb to the throat. The guy falls over the guy with the broken leg. The guy with the broken leg fucking pins him, and he gets carried out. The famous finish with Inoki and Hulk Hogan, where Hogan hit him with the clothesline. He took the bump off the apron. We still don't know whether that was legitimate or not. There was controversy about that, but it made huge news because something like that never happens. And I've seen guys get their bell rung, especially in tag team matches, but still finish the match because they weren't knocked completely out. Bobby Fulton's done that once. And I'm not saying that it's Moxley's fault or it's Page's fault. I'm saying something's going on, that there's more injuries than ever before, that it's happening more frequently, and that they're worse injuries when they do happen, requiring surgeries and concussion protocols and long times off and all that stuff. And you asked me earlier, they didn't have a concussion protocol back in the 70s and 80s, and that's correct. They didn't. They didn't know that much about it. And guys got their bell rung all the time and went right on, and it did damage. But at the same time, again, I was at matches 7 nights a week for 15 years. and this shit didn't happen. So something's different. And to me, it boils down to everybody's doing more and taking more chances and hitting harder or getting more complicated or getting more dangerous. And it still doesn't register because people are seeing this stuff. It's like a constant highlight video of car wrecks. You can't look away from the car wreck until it lasts 30 minutes, and then you get bored with it. So now that's what guys are doing. They are flying off of and falling down on and going through and getting hit with more shit than ever before. And because it happens so constantly, it's not registering with the people. They see it and pop, and then next day they're on to something else. But it's accumulating on the wrestlers' bodies. Who could have ever predicted something like that would happen 30 years ago?
You know, the most famous example of it happening on TV is the time it didn't actually happen, but the Shawn Michaels Owen Hart angle.
Yes.
In 95.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because somebody's going, well, Cornette, you were in on one. Everybody, and we made, took as much precaution as we could take to make sure that looked legitimate. But Michaels had the concussion, gotten beaten up in upstate New York, whatever. Everybody knew that was true. And everybody knew he returned from his concussion. And at the proper point, we were in Richmond, Virginia that night. I've never seen a house that small as in Richmond that night for WWF Monday Night Raw. But it was horrible. But Michaels, at some point in the match, all of a sudden, woozy, equilibrium, dizzy, and goes down. And then me and Owen are like, what the fuck? What do we do? What do we do? That was a work. 25 years later, I'll reveal that. But everybody was concerned because you never saw something like that happen. And you still don't see guys actually, knocked out and unable to finish the match. Well, except in AEW, they jumped off the top rope and landed on that guy's head here months ago. That was a dark match, not a TV match. And they just drug him to the side and tagged him out and continued around him. But I'm not saying I'm happy Adam Page landed on his head, even if he is boring and blah and fucked up the whole company by starting the whole snowball rolling with Punk. But that doesn't mean I want to see him break his neck, but guess he's going to try to do it regardless of how I feel about it. But again, you can't do all this shit and get away with it forever. So there you go.
Well, that was AEW Dynamite from Cincinnati, and there you go. And as we're wrapping things up, Jim, you are trending again on Twitter.
What'd I do now?
Apparently, a lot of people have a problem. Apparently, you're a racist because of your comments about Athena and her stiffness in that match with the other wrestler.
Because Athena's black. Because she's throwing this girl around and fucking beating the shit out of her. If I criticize that because she's black, then that means I'm a racist. What the fuck?
Apparently you using the phrase snatch you bald-headed has gotten people upset.
How is that racist?
I don't know. I'm actually looking it up because it's not a phrase I'm used to.
Mama Cornette used to say that all the time.
Here's an article. Where is this from? The Journal Inquirer. Lastly, an Enfield reader wrote, bet you haven't heard this one. My Swiss German mom used to yell, if you don't stop that, I'm going to snatch you bald-headed.
Yeah, grab you by the hair and it'll come all out.
Those New Englanders I moved among never let me forget it when I first used it. This is an article about slang words from the past, so apparently you using a phrase that other people weren't aware of about a wrestler that other people may like makes you another racist.
Oh, God. All righty. Anyway, don't get snatched bald-headed, folks. Listen to our programs every day, and we'll leave your hair alone. Yeah, Mama Cornette used to say that. She says, I'll snatch you bald-headed if you don't come over here, whatever the case.
The worst is still Tracy Smothers. I'll beat your dick stiff. Whatever he used to say.
No, I'll knock your dick stiff.
I'll knock your dick stiff. That was the fucking...
Well, actually, and maybe Adam Page can comment on this. Sometimes when you get fucking knocked out, it makes your dick stiff. That's where that fucking phrase came up.
All right. Well, the things you learn on the Jim Cornette, this is not the experience. On Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru, which we are finishing up, we will have a song next week